high time to take a quick break from the deeper philosophical stuff and go just a little less deep. It's still going to be pretty deep, but a little less deep. And it actually does, though, logically follow from the last video where we got into some of the philosophy of monism versus dualism versus qualified monism. So I thought this would be as good a time as any to talk about what a true perennialism is and what a true ecumenical effort would be. The fundamentalist religionists, of course, oppose pretty much any kind of interreligious dialogue, for obvious reasons. Exotericists are prone to be violently and militantly opposed to just about any kind of dialogue. Then, on the other hand, you have it seems that most of the people who are engaged in the modern ecumenical movement are really not very well acquainted with true mysticism, with the science of the soul. Otherwise, they would not be advocating putting your Johnny where it doesn't belong and other wonderful things that we don't need to unfold and get into now. But this is unsurprising. When you read the Gita, Krishna says only 1 in 1,000. I think it's either 1 in 1,000 or 1 in a million. I can't remember the expression. Even know the truth. And then out of them, only 1 in 1,000 or 1 in a million actually attain to me. Now, that doesn't mean that very few people will end up united to God. Everyone will end up united to God in Sanatana Dharma. But at any given time, he's saying, there are very few enlightened souls out there. Not that I'm enlightened. I would like to think that from a certain philosophical perspective, I'm enlightened, but I'm still very new. I'm a baby on the path here. I've got a lot of work to do on my ego and on myself. But anyway, there's a certain demonic or malevolent element to the modern ecumenical movement, which I just alluded to. But I actually wasn't going to address ecumenism immediately. I just wanted to kind of address this, in general, the spirit of the age, so I could lay the groundwork for talking a little bit more about what perennialism actually is. Because there's a popular notion among people out there who have decided to identify with the philosophy, that perennialism is this grab bag of religious ideas or religions, and we can just, like a tossed salad, kind of throw everything together at will and take what we like and discard what we don't like. We can syncretize, we can mix and match, which completely defeats the purpose of what a pure perennial philosophy actually is. First of all, perennialism has nothing to do with the idea that all religions are the same. Perennialism doesn't teach that all religions are the same. See, here's the problem, is that in the Western world, the West tends to adulterate just about everything. So, for example, New Ageism gives the Far Eastern religions a bad name. Not that there aren't some good things in it, but for the most part, I don't know. I don't know if I would say for the most part, but in certain very significant ways, it butchers the Eastern religions. The West butchers a lot of things in general. That's just one example. Westerners love their syncretism and their liberalism. So syncretism is a big part of how people in the West like to think of perennialism. Perennialism has everything to do with the science of the soul and virtually nothing to do with this idea that we need to mix religions or this idea that all religions are the same. You go and read just about any perennialist author worth his salt, like Houston Smith or whoever, and they would never advocate that. They would say that's actually very dangerous. And it shows that you're completely immature philosophically and spiritually, if that's what you think perennialism is or should be. And it should be self-evident that the religions aren't equal. The religions teach, particularly when you look more closely at the Abrahamic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, there are a lot of claims being made there that are mutually exclusive. They can't all be true at once, unless you're just going to be a relativist, in which case, why even bother being religious? Or spiritual. So, what the religions do is they help orient a person. Like the first four limbs of yoga have nothing to do with meditation. The first four limbs of yoga have to do with things like yamas and niyamas and restraints. It's where you learn the basics of ethics and morality and how to think about your place in the world from a dharmic perspective, in my case. And then, as you become a little more mature, a little bit more self-aware, a little bit more aware of the esoteric and the mystical and how you unite your soul to God, you become more aware of the science whereby you unite your soul to God. You can get into the last four limbs of yoga, the meditation part, and things like, how to, when you start practicing, then you understand, you'll know how to know when your nous or your intellect is, you'll be able to track the movement of your nous, the movement of your intellect. And you'll be able to detect when your nous is moving away from God and when it's moving towards God. And then when that happens, to stop and ask yourself, what am I doing wrong here? And then when you get that bliss back or that presence back, then you know what you just did to correct it. But that's what perennialism is. I'm not going to get into a long thing about the science of meditation. We can do that later. But perennialism has to do with the science of the soul, with how the soul unites itself to God and how it resolves duality or the perception of duality into unity or non-duality. So when you look at it from that standpoint, that science weaves its way through all of the religions. So it's not that all of the religions are the same, it's that there is a common element, a common central element that exists at a very core level within the major religions of the world. Even if in some of those religions, such as the Abrahamic ones, that core truth is more obscure, not so easy to find, and maybe even subordinated to some degree to one degree or another to the exoteric teachings and dogmas, even though it shouldn't be. So that's perennialism. And I'm going to say this now, I really have to, at some point, get on here and address Father Peter Heer's treatment of that subject. He actually wrote a quite lengthy rebuttal to what he perceives to be the perennial philosophy. Now, it was a very well written and very well organized piece, and it was quite thorough in its critique, but he really didn't understand what perennialism actually is. He's addressing a very flawed, popularized Western conception of perennialism. So, Lord willing, I am going to address that sooner rather than later, I think. But going back to what I was saying in the last video about the different philosophies within Dharma itself, the dualism and the monism and the qualified monism, qualified non-dualism, that can have an impact on your. You know what? I'm getting a little bit too far down the road. Let me take a step back and mention something else that perennialism is not. So perennialism is not the belief that all religions are the same. Perennialism is also not the idea that we should mix and match and take elements that we like from one religion or another. Because everyone is born within a certain environment. Everyone is born in a particular cultural milieu. Everyone is born with a certain temperament and psychological makeup. And one person may feel like he needs to, as a result, identify as a Muslim perennialist and pursue union with God as a Sufi mystic, let's say. And then you have your Orthodox hesychist. You might have your Jewish Kabbalist. You might have your Buddhist, your Hindu, your Taoist, your Sikhist, and so on. But it's very important that a person experience his or her spiritual formation within a well-defined and well-structured tradition that can first incubate you in the basics of spirituality and teach you morality and teach you ethics based on the tenets of your faith. And so, and most morality actually stems from Dharma. It stems from nature itself. Nature itself is sort of the book that teaches us what morality is. The book of nature. And most religions that don't even follow Dharma typically get most of their insights on morality from the book of nature as well. But that's another issue. So you need to have a concrete, well-organized, well-structured body of teaching with wise, discerning adepts who can steer you in the right direction and teach you and put you on a path towards God. That's number two. The third thing, and as I said that, it just popped out of my head. So there was a third thing, and I'm trying to remember what that was. Oh, even within Dharma itself, as I mentioned, we have different philosophies. There's also different modes of worship that can be described in terms of the various limbs of yoga. So you have Kriya Yoga, and you have Bhakti Yoga, which refers to devotion, and you have Jnana Yoga, which is knowledge, and Karma Yoga, which is just finding ways to unite with God in your consciousness, going about your daily routine. Maybe some people don't have the time to sit and meditate, right? So they have to concentrate on what Krishna recommended in the Gita, which is to not do anything with desire. Don't with the desire of getting something out of it. You just perform your tasks with complete neutrality and just do your duty. Leaving desire out of it. Now, these different modes of worship just correspond to different psychologies and different temperaments. So they're really equally valid and equally legitimate. But then there are different philosophies within Dharma, as I mentioned before. And those who adhere to those philosophies many of them would not, of course, would not admit that all of these philosophies are equal. Everyone, according to Sanatana Dharma, will, in the end, arrive in union with God. But that doesn't mean that every path to God is equal. It doesn't mean that every path is just as helpful or just as effective as another. Some paths are more personal. Some paths are less personal to a degree that would be deleterious to a person's, I think, journey. There are some people who, depending on their experience, what they've gone through in life, they might need to temporarily follow a certain trajectory before maybe improving on that philosophy. So there's a lot of different things, a lot of different variations, variables, factors that enter into all of this, because humans are very complicated creatures, of course. This is not just a simple mathematical formula. But I would say that there are paths that are more direct paths to God, and other paths that are less direct. Everybody who engages in the science of true mysticism and meditation is seeing the sun. They're all seeing the same thing, to use an analogy. They're seeing the light from the sun, but they may be getting it in different degrees, seeing it in different degrees. And they may all be reaching the goal, but they're reaching it at different times. So there's no need to condemn anyone to damnation. It's a very different idea from it's a very different dynamic from what you will see in the Abrahamic religions, where if you get something wrong, or if something is deemed to be a little bit off or not quite right, it's the end of the road, right? It either puts you in the camp of the heretics, or you're good to go. So yes, it's true. There there are better paths and worse paths. You may go through more suffering. You may go through more trials. You may go through more lives as a result of the choices that you make. You may suffer more than someone else. But the destination, everyone will reach that destination. So the paths are not equal. The idea that everyone will reach the same destination should not be confused with the idea that the paths are equal, that all of the paths to God or options out there are equal. Nor does it mean, and I'm going to tack this on here at the end, because I actually overheard a couple of seconds of a video that Father Peter Hears, to bring him up again, did on universalism. And he was mischaracterizing it grossly, what universalism was. Again, there may be people out there who want to think of universalism in terms of being given a free pass to behave and do whatever they like in life and still get to go to heaven. But that assumes that's an accurate depiction of what most universalists teach or believe. And I certainly, speaking for Dharmis believe that we are to unite our souls to God mystically in the way that hesychasts do. So we believe that we have to deal with the impurities within ourselves and overcome those impurities, overcome those passions. And that is the only means to union with God, and we're not going to get there until that happens. So he's really Father Peter Hears is really barking up the wrong tree when he addresses universalism as meaning that we can do whatever we want, and when he addresses perennialism as meaning that all religions are the same, or that all paths to God are the same. Thanks again for listening today. That was my second video of the day, and I'm going to this will probably be the last one I do today.